My name is Shura. I live in London, although it doesn't really feel like that because I'm constantly touring. When I was a child, I was very conscious of the fact that I wasn't just English, and I was very proud of that. And sometimes that would be something that kids would tease you for, and I would kind of rebel against that by trying to be more Russian and more proud. But then, of course, you go to Russia, and having been a person who's lived all your life in England, you're like, oh, I am so not Russian. I feel so English here. So it's quite interesting in that you almost don't feel like you have a place anywhere. But this doesn't have to be negative. It's just that you don't quite fit in. You kind of float between these two identities. For many years, I would be like, I think it's pretty easy to be queer in this world, in the world that I live in London, for instance, or in Europe or in America. And then there are world events that happen that make you realise, actually, we're in the middle of a story arc. And hopefully the end of that arc is where no one talks about it anymore. What happened in Orlando was a very big shock for the queer community, because Florida or America certainly is a place where generally people consider it to be safe to be out and to go to a club. And that was completely horrifying. I've been in America for 2 months. I was there for the entire run-up to the election, which was fascinating to watch a country sort of go through a very similar process to what I feel happened with Brexit, which was people were very complacent that Hillary would win. They were just like, yeah, it's crazy, it's going to be tight, but Hillary will win. And the same thing happened with Brexit. We were like, you know what, it's going to be close, but we're going to remain a part of the EU. And the night of the election, there was just something very strange in the air that I recognised from having gone through that with the UK, that people were just complacent and maybe therefore not voting, or not because they just trusted that kind of reason would win. And I think we've seen in these two political events that the game has changed irrevocably forever. Like, we're in a new age of politics where telling the truth doesn't matter anymore, where being polite or reasonable doesn't matter anymore. You can say whatever you want. And if you're, activating a kind of people who feel neglected or unlistened to as a result of democracy, and democracy is incredibly flawed, then yeah, you can win by a kind of landslide. With politics, it's always waves. We go through waves. At the moment, we're seeing this very interesting kind of global shift towards the right as a result of a few years of liberalism, and all that we can hope is that as people who are, or certainly I am as a person who sort of opposes this shift to the right, is that we remain engaged and active, and that we at every turn peacefully, but we fight, and we try and make it better, because in theory Donald Trump could do some very, very dangerous things, but just because he's in charge doesn't mean that we don't exist, and that we can't at every opportunity question his judgment and protest against it, and try and at least minimize the damage that is done over the next 4 years. In every nation, in Spain, for instance, we've just had a minority right-wing government elected when 70% pretty much of the nation voted for left-wing parties, but a coalition, an agreement couldn't be made. So it's just about being engaged and voting. I think voting is incredibly important. What the system that Australia have is that it's mandatory to vote, and maybe that's something that we should encourage. And you could go in and you could vote, I don't know, or I don't care, or I'm not going to vote, and that's fine, but at least we're getting people to think about it. I don't know. Maybe I should be president. If you first pick up a guitar or a laptop or a keyboard, you start writing songs kind of in the privacy of your room, generally, because you're learning. And I still feel like that even now, and I've obviously made a record, I feel kind of creatively still quite shy, and it's very important to me for every idea that I have to start in a place like that that's kind of intimate and private. Village Underground, I think, is one of my favourite venues in London as well, and Melkweg is amazing. Not just because I'm obsessed with space and it's called the Milky Way. You know, the venues that, you know, are part of this initiative are incredible. Like this, I think, playing here is one of the greatest, if not the best venue in Europe. It's really difficult to tour outside of your own country. One, it's expensive, and two, yeah, it's difficult to find. You know, I remember being a young artist, and you know, I wanted to go and play in Copenhagen, and this was before I kind of wrote the music that I'm writing now. And it's like that you can't, but to be able to come and play in some of the best venues in Europe on my first album is amazing, and it, you know, if it wasn't for that support, you just wouldn't be able to do it.